Such a conference organizer crush on her. All right. Our next speaker, I have two more to go here, has worked at some spectacularly failed startups, which will probably make him sympathetic to those of you who have worked for companies or on product launches that have just tanked. But he's also worked on some notable successes, and he's come to realize that success is not always just about luck or about a cool technology. And he's now at the forefront of the lean startup movement, which seeks to identify some of the repeatable factors of success. Please welcome Ries.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all very much. This is very exciting. I would like to start today. I'm Ries, by the way. I write the blog Startup Lessons Learned, which hopefully will show on here. The hashtag is Lean Startup, if you would. Thank you. I would like to ask all of us a simple thing, which is to stop wasting people's time. And here's what I mean. We all know that startups fail. We're accustomed to that. I thought I'd bring a demonstration. This is Web 2.0, circa 2006, when our enthusiasm was at its peak. A graphic designer put together this patchwork quilt of logos. And then I also brought what I consider to be our midterm report card. It looks like this. This is Web 2.0 circa 2009. You can already see the blood red X's of all the companies that are no longer with us. And yet the designer also made an interesting choice to mark with green circles the supposed successes of Web 2.0. Those are the companies that have gone IPO or were acquired, which means they were acquired. And which is another way of saying those are the companies where somebody made money. And I'm all for people making money. But my question for today is, how many of these supposed successes succeeded in living up to the raw talent, passion, time, and energy that the founders and employees poured into them? And I think by that higher standard of success, we're not doing very well as an industry. And in case you think I'm just picking on startups, the same statistics hold true in new product introductions in the enterprise, in the supermarket. It's true of corporate IT projects. And I don't think it's because we're taking too much risk. On the contrary, I think we're taking not enough risk. Because we are building products that fundamentally nobody wants. And that is a preventable condition. Now, that is when I say stop wasting people's time, that's what I mean. We are building faith-based initiatives, and that's not a good idea. We are taking untested, unvalidated assumptions, and we are pouring people's time and energy into them. Now, lest you think I'm being negative about entrepreneurship, you should know I think entrepreneurship is awesome. And that this thing we call software, internet, Web 2.0, is changing the face of work in this world. Software is imagination made tangible, and because of that, it has non-linear effects in every industry it infects. And that causes disruption, chaos, lowering of barriers, and stress for our friends who are in established businesses, but tremendous opportunity for entrepreneurs everywhere. And in the last year, as I have traveled the world talking about this thing called the Lean Startup, I have gotten to see that there are now more practicing entrepreneurs on this earth than have ever been in the history of the world. And those entrepreneurs are not necessarily going to make any money. Let's be honest. Entrepreneurship is not a good way to make money. I'm sorry if there's some of you for whom that's bad news. But entrepreneurship is a noble calling. It combines uniquely among careers three simultaneous things. The ability to change the world for the better, the ability to create lasting value, and also make customers' lives better, all at the same time. And yet, it is these very entrepreneurs who are wasting people's time building something that nobody wants. And I think in order to stop that from happening, we have to put the practice of entrepreneurship on a more rigorous footing. And the first step is to begin with a definition. So here's mine. A startup is a human institution designed to create something new under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Notice I didn't say anything about what industry you're in, or what sector of the economy, or even the size of company you work at. In my travels, I have gotten to meet many very talented, involuntary entrepreneurs who tried to take a safe job at a safe company in a safe industry, but then discovered there's no such thing in this world. So anyone who's trying to create disruptive innovation under conditions of uncertainty is an entrepreneur. That's not a metaphor. And that's just a fancy way of saying a startup is an experiment. An experiment not just in can we build a product, but should we build it? And more importantly, can we build an organization, a sustainable organization, to support that series of products and services. And the funny thing about that definition is it means that entrepreneurship is management. Because when we think of management, most of us have a very 20th century view of what that looks like. We think of general management as was practiced in the 20th century, the general management that powers the supply chains that, let's face it, keep us all alive. But I believe we need a new management science, entrepreneurial management, not better or worse than general management, but different, geared specifically to the principles of extreme uncertainty that is the soil in which all entrepreneurs live. And the first of those management principles I want to talk about is this thing called the pivot. The pivot is a word that's gone a little bit mainstream this year. It's entered the zeitgeist. I knew when I saw this in the New Yorker, I don't know if you can read this, it says, "I'm not leaving you, I'm pivoting to a new man." So sorry about that. But that cartoon actually has a certain wisdom to it, because what entrepreneurs do when they have a vision and encounter difficulty is they don't just give up on the vision, but they don't just persevere the plane right into the ground either. They keep one foot firmly rooted in what they've learned so far, while systematically changing one other thing at a time. And that's why successful entrepreneurs do not have better ideas than unsuccessful entrepreneurs. They have superior process. And they have this kind of zigzaggy path from initial idea to eventual success, which only in retrospect looks nice and linear, or unfortunately when you read about it in the press. And the premise of the lean startup is actually very simple. If we can reduce the time between pivots, we can increase our odds of success before we run out of money. Because what matters in any entrepreneurial situation, from the garage to the enterprise, is not how much money do I have left, but how many pivots do I have left. So if we're going to stop wasting people's time, we have to learn to pivot faster. And yet, the fastest way to iterate is just to go around and around in a circle. That's not helpful either. We have to know, how do we know if we're making progress or just engaged in forward motion? And that is the enduring conundrum of entrepreneurship, knowing if I'm making progress. The lean startup takes its inspiration and its principles from lean manufacturing that confronted the same question. How do we tell the difference between value-creating activities and waste? As I mentioned at the top, many startups are actually building something that nobody wants. And if you're building something that nobody wants, what does it matter if you're on budget and on time or on schedule? Why are we using milestones and schedules to manage something which fundamentally is uncertain and has, in many cases, a fatal problem at the root? Instead, we need a new definition of progress, what I call validated learning, and I'll share with you how I came to that conclusion. This is how I was taught to do product development as a software engineer in Silicon Valley. It's called the waterfall methodology. I'm sure many of you have tried this. I was taught this as the manufacturing metaphor for software development. And you can imagine how pissed I was when I found out that they don't even use it for manufacturing anymore. So what's our excuse for doing it in software development? It's ridiculous. And the waterfall methodology is easy to pick on because we've had quite a lot of time to study it. But it's important to remember that the waterfall methodology does work when you're in a situation of the known problem, known solution. That is, when you're making something that is very similar to something you have made in the past, you can have this linear sense of progress through a pre-existing plan. That's why the unit of progress of waterfall is advancing to the next stage. As long as we're doing what we said we were going to do, we consider that success, even if what we said we were going to do was stupid. And that is what leads to this problem we call achieving failure. When you successfully execute the plan, but the plan takes you right off a cliff. Now, the last 10 years have been about this thing called agile product development. And I've shown here, this is extreme programming, which is my personal favorite of the agile methodologies. And agile has the important insight that if we change our unit of progress to a line of working code, we can stop achieving failure. And this point of view works when the problem is known, it's the solution that is unknown, which is often the case in corporate IT projects where agile has had its biggest impact. So if we create specification documents that nobody reads, or documentation that goes stale, or create software with bugs that then have to be reworked, all that constitutes waste, and agile is a way of eliminating that waste. Unfortunately, startups don't live in this world either. They live in this world. The unknown problem and unknown solution. If we're going to sit a customer, an in-house customer, with the engineers, what if we don't know who the customer is yet? What if we don't know what problem we're trying to solve yet? There's a lot on this diagram I can't go into today. You can learn more on my blog. I just want to focus in on this idea of the unit of progress called validated learning. And I'll just tell you a story. I founded a company called IMVU, and the very first version of that product took us 6 months to build. And I was the CTO of the company. It was my job to be responsible for the technical architecture, and I don't want to mince words. The first version of this product sucked. Okay, it was every bit as likely to crash your computer as it was to give you your delightful consumer 3D avatar experience. And I was personally embarrassed to ship it. I was like, oh God, people are going to use it and think, we don't know what quality software is. I had this image of a journalist writing this article, idiots launch software, don't know about quality. But it turned out I needed to have worried. Some of you already know the punchline because you've done this too, because of course nobody used the software. We couldn't even get people to download it, so they couldn't even discover how buggy it was. And it was my co-founders who had to drag me kicking and screaming to the realization that we'd actually built the wrong product. We had once again built something that nobody wanted. And let's face it, I was depressed. Because I was the guy who had written, 40,000 lines of code to build that initial prototype, almost all of which had to get thrown out. The good code and the bad code alike. Failure is a great equalizer of quality. And then I said, wait, are you telling me I would have contributed just as much value to this company if I had spent the last 6 months on a beach, on vacation, as I did killing myself to get this prototype out? I said, no, that's not true. Because if we hadn't written all this code, we wouldn't have learned this important thing about customers. So then I felt better. And then I had this dark thought that plagued me, which was, but if my goal of the last 6 months was to learn this important thing about customers, did I really need 40,000 lines of code to do it? Is there no way I could have had the same learning with 20,000 lines of code? Or 10,000? And then I was like, wait, what if I had just asked some customers if they would like to download this product? After all, 0% of them did. Would I have learned the same amount in 1 week as I did in 6 months? And that led me to this. This is the kind of the flux capacitor of the lean startup, if you will. This is the fundamental feedback loop that powers all startups. The build, measure, learn feedback loop. We take vision, we turn it into action. Through that action, we reveal the truth about our vision, and we iterate. And from this diagram, I can give you a heuristic for evaluating any process or managerial or architecture change in a startup situation, which is, does it minimize the total time through this feedback loop, or does it sub-optimize by helping us do only our narrow job function well? Most of the management practices that kill startups violate that simple rule. And with this diagram, I can now put the concept of a pivot on a more rigorous footing, because I can say a pivot is one full turn through this feedback loop. Now, there's a lot more to the lean startup. It looks like this. These are all the specific tactics and techniques that we teach. You can learn about this online if you're interested. What all of these techniques have in common is my belief that they operate at one specific stage of the feedback loop, but they have the effect of minimizing total time through the feedback loop. In other words, they help us stop wasting people's time. And before I close, I want to share one last thing. This is actually a full circle moment for me. I first talked about the lean startup in public 1 year ago at the Web 2.0 Expo right here in San Francisco. And since that time, what began as a movement of high-tech entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley to increase our odds of success has really blossomed into something much bigger. A movement that I believe is dedicated to stop wasting people's time. You may be familiar with this. This is the Gartner hype cycle. The lean startup has reached almost the top of the peak of inflated expectations, and I'm sad to say that I think we're coming on the trough of disillusionment pretty soon. So I apologize for the hype. That's not my goal. And because of the hype, there have been some misunderstandings about the lean startup that have become somewhat prevalent. I actually believe being misunderstood is a big step up from being ignored. So thank you. And I want to address those misunderstandings because each of them reveals a deeper truth about what we're trying to do with this movement. And so I thought I'd just talk about them briefly. The first is that lean means cheap. And people who feel this way really don't understand that lean has a specific word, a specific meaning in a business context. Lean is about speed. Speed through that fundamental feedback loop, not bodies in motion, but validated learning about. There are quite a few other theorists, Steve Blank, Dave McClure, Sean Ellis, who come from different backgrounds who have been part of this movement. And I think we're starting to get the word out. As I said at the top, any business that faces uncertainty about what customers will want can benefit from these techniques. The third myth is that lean startups are somehow small bootstrap startups. They either lack ambition or they take pride in being cheap. But our goal, remember, is to create a human institution that can grow, that can change the world, that can have an impact. And in fact, as our friends in the venture community are starting to learn, when we actually understand what customers actually want, instead of just what we hope or think they want, We actually have the ability to deploy large amounts of capital more effectively than in traditional models. And last, this is the most pernicious, that somehow by incorporating data or feedback into our entrepreneurial process, we seek to replace vision with data. And as I said right at the beginning, entrepreneurship fundamentally is about vision, about a vision of the world as it might be. And what I think is odd is that if we really believe those visions, if we really believe the world needs to change in an urgent way, then I don't understand how we can afford to be engaged in a faith-based initiative. I don't understand that. If we have assumptions that are essential to the success of that vision, we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the world to test them against reality, to see what actually is possible, and, of course, to stop wasting people's time. So, here's how to get in touch. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you for being here.